everyone, this is Lara Hammock from the Marble Jar channel, and in today's video I'll tell you why you should ditch the innate calendar app on your iPhone and use the Google Calendar app instead. So a couple of weeks ago, I decided to stress test the Google Calendar app for iPhone and iPad and temporarily ditch the innate iOS calendar app that I had been using for upwards of a decade. Okay, immediately this was a pretty low risk proposition on my part. I already use Google Calendar to sync with my iOS calendar, so I didn't need to migrate data or manage parallel systems during this test. I could cut over immediately with no import or really any work at all, and I could revert back to my old system at any time without any loss of data. So I had tried the Google Calendar app at times in the past, but I have some picky requirements that I'm not willing to compromise on, so the app never totally met my needs. But I guess they've done some development since I'm now using it full time with no plans at all to go back. So first, let's go over the pros. Here are the reasons I like the Google Calendar app over the iOS calendar app. Google Maps. Honestly, this was the biggest driver in getting me to convert to a different app. I use Google Maps for driving navigation. It is so much better than the iPhone's map app. I won't go into all the reasons here, but for me, there's really no comparison at all. I almost always put in a location for all of my calendar events. Using the iOS calendar, if I click on the address, it automatically opens the location in Maps. No, thank you. But there's no way to change the default map app, so I need to copy the address and then open Google Maps and then paste it in and sometimes even search for it to get it to navigate. So this doesn't seem like a huge deal, but after doing this literally hundreds of times, I really like the idea of hitting the address and having it do all of that automatically. The Google Calendar app lets you choose a default Maps program if you're one of the 3 people on Earth who prefer iOS Maps. So you're going to go into More, and then Settings, and then Apps from Google. So you can also choose a default browser and a default email app. Views. So one of the reasons I've never switched over in the past is that I strongly prefer week view or weekly view, particularly on the iPad. I tolerate daily view on the iPhone since when you turn the phone to landscape, you can see several dates together. Granted, I find this a little disorienting, being sort of plopped into the middle of the week, and in the end, I still really prefer a weekly view. So how exciting that you can do a 3-day view on the Google Calendar iPhone app, and when you turn it to landscape, you get weekly view. You can actually also just choose weekly view for portrait, but that is awkwardly skinny even for me. Some people also really love the schedule view. Suffice it to say, there are enough options, view options, for most people to be happy. Prettier. Okay, this seems silly and unimportant, and it would never ever be my main decision-making criterion, but all other things being equal, wouldn't you rather have the app that is nicer to look at? So first of all, it's much brighter and more vivid than the iOS calendar app. Here they are side by side. Second of all, for the iPad app, if you turn on Show Background Illustrations under Settings, it grabs these whimsical, colorful drawings as the background heading for each month. So let me put this in month view and show you some of the illustrations. And lastly, on this prettier point, the Google Calendar app sometimes grabs either keywords from your event or the event's location and then matches them with a photo to jazz up some of your appointments. Like, let me show you a couple of location examples where Google Calendar has grabbed an image from the internet and made them the background. Here's one for a concert at Wolf Trap. Here's the Women's Center where I volunteer, or Coastal Flats restaurant where I'm having lunch with a friend. And here are a couple of examples of keywords. This is the first day of school. This is the art for lunch with friends. And here's one for tennis practice. Cute, huh? Admit it. You use your boring calendar quite a bit, and it's fun to have some visual surprises. Conversational scheduling. So I really like the quick add feature in the browser edition of Google Calendar. It lets you kind of write a stream of consciousness phrase like coffee with Anne on Friday at 3 p.m. and it attempts to parse it into the appropriate appointment fields, not always with perfect success. So the Google Calendar app has incorporated this functionality, but it's still really clunky. It doesn't always work, and it has some really strange semantic rules, like you have to spell out months entirely, and you can't write times separated by a dash, which I always do. But I think this is a good start to more natural scheduling that doesn't look entirely like data entry, so we'll just call this a placeholder. Notes field. So this doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is to me. I use the notes field on appointments a lot. I put event details in there and also attachments. You can see my video on quote unquote attaching files. On the iOS calendar, the notes section is way down at the bottom so that I almost always have to scroll down to see all my notes. On the Google Calendar app, notes are in a more central spot, so I rarely have to scroll down. Google Drive. For iOS calendar, there is no way to attach documents, although I have created a workaround. If you use the Google Calendar app, you can attach files directly from Google Drive. So I haven't used this much, but I can see how it might come in handy. Let's go through the cons. There are some drawbacks, but not too many, and here they are. Siri. Google Calendar does not work directly with Siri. So I use Siri quite a bit for hands-free, everything. For example, you can say, "Hey Siri, make an appointment to get my haircut at 3 p.m. on Friday." And Siri will create an event with all of those details in iOS Calendar. So that said, even though Siri doesn't directly talk with Google Calendar, if you keep the iOS Calendar running in the background and continue to have it synced with your Google Calendar, you can still use Siri in this way. So it doesn't work quite as quickly, but it still appeared in my Google Calendar app within 15 seconds. Not bad. Email. Same thing here. I have not moved over to the Gmail app yet, and iOS doesn't give you an option to choose your default calendar app, so the Mail app only interfaces with iOS Calendar. So I really like being able to make events right from Mail messages like this one, right? So if there are enough details in the email, you can just click on the link that the Mail app provides and create the event. But guess what? The same logic applies. This still works in creating events in Google Calendar using the iOS Calendar app as a conduit. This time it appeared in 8 seconds. Default calendar. If you've watched my video on using Google Calendar for my family, you know that I have a couple of active Google Calendars. I have a personal one, and then I have one that's only for family events. So iOS Calendar allows you to set a default calendar that comes up every time you create an event. The Google Calendar app doesn't let you do this, but I think I've figured out that it just defaults to whatever calendar you used last. So that is slightly disorienting for me, but I think I can probably get used to it. Change calendar. So I can't figure out for the life of me how to change a calendar for an event. So in my case, this would be a personal to family or family to personal. So and I can't figure out how to do that once I've saved it. Maybe there is something I'm missing here. Anyway, there are workarounds. You can either recreate the event, or you can go into iOS Calendar and make that change and it appears in Google Calendar. So I'm a convert to the Google Calendar app. I love all of the pros, and the cons are definitely not deal breakers. Let me know what you think. Comments are always appreciated, and thanks for watching.